Dark Places, the plot, it's about a woman who, when she was a child, when she was 7 or so, she was in the house when her mother and 2 sisters were brutally murdered, and now her brother has been serving a life sentence for the crimes, and she had always kind of stayed away from it, the dark places in her past, but due to some prodding, decides to go out and get to the bottom of it. Did the brother, in fact, do it?
Right.
When I first saw the plot description, I didn't think I could handle it. I thought, I love thrillers, but this is just too much, too gory. But then I couldn't stop reading it. I loved it. I was entertained by it. I felt a little guilty about being entertained by it. What do you think it is why do we enjoy reading this kind of stuff?
You know, I mean, and why do I enjoy writing it so much? The same thing. I think it kind of ties, like, we just like being scared. You know, I was one of those kids who, you know, loved, you know, stayed up for the Friday Fright Nights and that sort of thing. It was my favorite thing of the week to kind of really freak myself out. And I don't know exactly what that, you know, serves us or why we like that, but I certainly have always enjoyed just kind of, you know, being scared out of your skin, and always kind of wanted to try to write something like that.
But there's gore and guts.
Yes.
And that kind of fright. And then there's
both human and animal variety. Yeah.
Right. And also devil worship. You know, devil worship plays a big role in the book. Not necessarily that it's happening, but that people really think it's happening.
Think it's happening, yeah.
And the book takes place in the present and in the 80s. And I grew up on the East Coast. I heard about devil worship. I knew about the lyrics in heavy metal or whatever. But it wasn't really a part of my... But you grew up in Kansas City. Was devil worship something that people were genuinely concerned about?
You know, I don't. There were always, I don't know. I think growing up in the 80s at that time period. I mean, at least for me, I watched a lot of Geraldo, and Geraldo told us that, you know, there were always a devil worshiper on the street and that kind of thing, and you know, there was always kind of that weird, you know, the weird house that no one wanted to go to because devil worshippers lived there, or that kind of thing. I mean, I think it was like a lot of this kind of, again, kids trying to scare themselves and that kind of thing. You know, in the 80s, they talk about the Satanic Panic, where it really was this kind of sociological thing, you know, that people were kind of grasping on, you know, that, you know, there really was this underground cult of devil worshippers, and people were being accused of this sort of thing, and, you know, actually going to jail on these accusations, and that was kind of, that phenomenon always kind of interested me.
Isn't devil worship kind of actually a peaceful thing? I mean, it's not Reformed Judaism. I understand that, but it's not a horrible kill your family type of situation. It's just like, all right, we'll do some animal sacrifices and then hang out in the basement and smoke pot.
Listen to a little Iron Maiden, kick back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not. I mean, the book, in your books, in both books, one of the things that is very appealing is the strength of the female characters. You read so many thrillers and mystery novels and, of course, noir, and you have the stereotypical kind of femme fatale, and you don't stick with those kind of things. Is it because you're a female writer that you have more insight, you think, into the female psyche? Is this something that you set out consciously to do?
You know, I set out to write female characters just because, you know, I've only written 2 books, and so I feel very comfortable, you know, writing from a female point of view, being a woman. And also, I just thought there was a lot of room out there in the world for some really unlikable women. You know, I find that there's not enough women in books who are, you know, not just the pure evil femme fatale, but just kind of these flawed, rotten people. You know, having read a lot of noir, I was always kind of interested in, you know, the hard-boiled detective who has this kind of past and everything. And, you know, I thought, well, what would that look like if it was from a woman's point of view? And so that kind of always kind of interested me. So, you know, I've written these women who are, you know, barely functioning alcoholics, or, you know, self-cutters or drug addicts or sex addicts and that sort of thing. And it's been very fun so far. It's more interesting than the goody two-shoes.
Well, you've got an essay that you wrote called I Was Not a Nice Little Girl. And in it, you make some funny comments about what you did as a child, but it's a very serious piece. And you write, Men speak fondly of those strange bursts of childhood aggression, their disastrous, immature sexuality. They have a vocabulary for sex and violence that women just don't. Are you trying to kind of create that vocabulary?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's important to have that out there. I mean, the entire, literary genre is so filled with books about, men and the cycles of violence, father to son and that sort of thing. And there isn't that really for women to have that easy way, that vocabulary of talking about, kind of our dark side, our, the aggression and bitterness and rage and all that sort of stuff that is part of just being a person. But I don't think you see that as much with women's stuff. It's either, this kind of exaggerated, that, Devil Wears Prada kind of villain, or, it's the cute heroine, and there's nothing that much in between. So that interests me is that side.
The piece you wrote, which again is very serious and about that, has one of the funniest lines that I've read, and you write, it's about your childhood, and you write, in downtime I also enjoyed watching softcore porn on scrambled cable channels. And I gotta say, and this is the sexist in me, I thought only boys did that. But
I spent many a wonderful afternoon just flipping through,
and trying to get that
just
split
catch
second.
Like, oh, boob, oh,
Yeah.
What's going on there? Yeah.
I gotta say, I feel nowadays, like children, they don't have to work for their porn.
They don't
like
have to. Yeah, I know. It's a real problem, I think. Where's the work ethic?
I do think that is a problem.
Yeah.
Like if you just get, I mean, I remember there would be times when, like 3 times in my childhood, where somebody would find like a Playboy that had been soggy and wet and thrown in the dumpster, and it would just be like we'd found gold.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. It was we had there was one certain night where you always knew there was going to be some sort of naughty, risque, a totally softcore kind of porn, but it was always like, well, slumber party.
Yeah.
It's like we got to hang out and see this.
I have a friend who tells a story. He had a slumber party, or I don't know if guys call it slumber parties, but a sleepover.
Hang out. Yeah.
Hang out, right. We were just going to crash at the same place
that's
together.
Correct.
And they had, I don't know, it was back in the 80s, and there was some box they had on their TV that had a key. And if you turned the key, you could get the porn channels. And the father in the family wanted the porn channels, so he had this box and he had the key. So the kids would scream at the party, come on, please, can you just turn the key? So the father walks up like he's in a Wild West movie, just like and he says, all right, just for 10 minutes, I'll be back, and turns the key. And it was like the greatest moment in this kid's life. My dad didn't do that for me.
That's why you didn't have good sleepovers.
Well, let's get back to the books. One of the things we can talk more about porn later. One of the